The rain had started as a mist, the kind that made the tall glass buildings look like they were dissolving into the gray sky. By noon, it had turned into a steady drizzle, turning the city street into a mirror of wet asphalt and flickering reflections. Cars crawled along, windshield wipers beating in tired rhythm. Most people kept their heads down, hurrying along the sidewalk, chasing shelter and schedules. But on the corner of 7th and Marlowe, one man worked as if the rain were nothing more than an inconvenience. He stood beside a small stainless steel cart, its metal sides dotted with raindrops and fingerprints. Inside were neatly arranged fruits and vegetables, tomatoes, limes, cucumbers, onions, bunches of cilantro, bright colors against the dull day. A simple plastic tarp covered the top, sagging in the middle where water pooled before dripping onto the street. His clothes were plain, a faded beige shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and worn brown pants. His hair was slightly messy, damp from the weather. He looked like any other immigrant street vendor, quiet, tired, blending into the background of the city he served. His name, at least for today, was Mr. Lee. He handed a bag of tomatoes to an older woman, giving her a small smile. $3, he said in accented but clear English. The woman fumbled in her purse, grateful. "You're always here, rain or shine. Don't you ever rest?" Mr. Lee shrugged lightly. "People need food. Food doesn't wait for the weather." What she didn't know, what no one on that sidewalk knew, was that Mr. Lee had left a very different outfit hanging in his closet that morning. An expensive suit, a silk tie, and a neatly pressed dress shirt. The kind worn by someone whose name appeared on the front page of newspapers. The kind worn by someone whose decisions could shape an entire city. Today, the mayor had chosen a different uniform. Underneath the simple shirt, Dominic Reyes, the elected mayor of the city, wore a concealed microphone. A small camera was pinned inside the cart's frame, hidden behind a bag of onions. He had agreed to this risky undercover experiment after reading one too many reports on his desk. Complaints of harassment, of street vendors pushed around, of residents who felt the police were more interested in control than protection. He had all the statistics, charts, graphs, legal memos, carefully constructed responses, but none of that told him how it felt. None of that showed him what it meant to stand on wet pavement with nothing between you and the world except a small cart of produce and the hope that today no one would decide you were a problem. So he had come here at dawn in disguise, leaving his security detail several blocks away with only a trusted aide watching from a distance. The plan was simple: observe, listen, experience. He did not expect the test to come so quickly. At first, the morning was quiet. A few pedestrians stopped for vegetables. A young man in a hoodie picked up some limes and smiled as he scanned his phone to pay. Mr. Lee, Mayor Reyes, counted change slowly, his fingers slightly clumsy but improving as the hours went by. It was almost noon when the first police car rolled up. The flashing blue and red lights painted the wet street in nervous color. The car stopped at an angle, blocking part of the lane. Nearby drivers honked in frustration, but no one dared to say anything. The officer who stepped out was tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform crisp despite the drizzle. His name tag read, Dr. Harrison. He slammed the door shut and walked straight toward the cart. Mr. Lee noticed him, but kept his focus on the customer in front of him, a young woman buying cucumbers. He handed her the bag, his voice calm. $2, please. The officer stopped just a few feet away. "Hey," he barked, "you can't set up here." A few heads turned. The woman flinched, fumbling with her money. Mr. Lee looked up slowly, eyes narrowing as if he didn't quite understand. "I am just selling vegetables, officer. I've been here all morning."
"That's the problem," Harrison snapped. He gestured broadly at the sidewalk, as if the small cart were some massive obstruction. "You're blocking the walkway and the street sightlines. You got a permit for this, huh?" The mayor's heart thudded in his chest, though his face stayed neutral. "My permit is at home," he lied, playing the part. "I forgot it today. "I'm sorry, I can pack and move." The young woman paid him quickly, hands shaking, then stepped away, eyes darting between the officer and the vendor. Behind her, 3 more people had stopped to watch. A man in a dark gray shirt, a woman with reddish hair, another young woman in a black jacket. Their expressions were a mix of confusion and unease. "That's not how this works," Harrison growled. Rain glistened on his cap brim. "You don't just say oops and it's fine. You people think you can just pop up anywhere." There was an edge to the way he said "you people" that made something twist in the mayor's stomach. "I said I will move," Mr. Lee replied quietly. "No problem." He reached for a plastic bag of produce, intending to start packing, but the officer stepped closer, closing the distance between them so abruptly that the cart rattled. Harrison's jaw clenched. Maybe it was the long shift, maybe a string of calls that had gone badly, maybe something darker that he carried inside. But in that moment, the authority in his badge felt like a weapon he could swing. "Don't turn your back on me," he snapped. Mr. Lee paused and looked at him again. The city around them kept moving. Cars, distant sirens, the hiss of tires through puddles. But this small patch of wet pavement suddenly felt like a stage no one could leave. "I am not turning my back," the vendor said quietly. "I'm just cleaning up my things. I don't want trouble." "Too late," Harrison muttered. He reached out, grabbing the cart with one hand and pushing it hard. The metal lurched, bags of produce slid off the top, crashing onto the street. Tomatoes burst open, their red flesh mixing with dirty rainwater. Oranges rolled into the gutter. A bag of onions split, scattering pale bulbs like marbles. Gasps rose from the bystanders. "Hey, that's not necessary," someone said. "Whoa," another murmured, instinctively pulling out a phone. Mr. Lee instinctively stepped forward, reaching for the falling fruit. "Please, careful! That is my livelihood!" "Your livelihood is violating city code. I could write you up for obstruction, health violations, illegal vending. You should be thanking me for just telling you to move." The vendor straightened, rain dripping from his eyebrows. His heart pounded against his ribs. Part of him wanted to shout his real name, to pull out his ID and end this farce with one sentence. But the other part knew that the moment he did that, the truth of this interaction, how it felt to be small and powerless in front of a man with a badge, would evaporate. He forced himself to stay in character. "I understand," he said softly. "I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Let me clean this and I'll go." Harrison stared at him, lips curling in contempt. "You don't get it, do you?" he muttered. "You people come here, take over the sidewalks, act like the rules don't apply. You think sorry fixes everything." And then, in front of everyone, he did something that made time slow down. He slapped the vendor across the face. The sound cracked through the foggy air, a sharp, humiliating snap. Mr. Lee's head snapped to the side, his eyes squeezing shut from the impact. Pain bloomed across his cheek, hot and immediate. One of his arms fell limp, while the other hovered in the air, fingers trembling. Behind him, 3 more onlookers recoiled. The woman with reddish hair clapped a hand over her mouth. The man in the gray shirt stepped forward instinctively, then hesitated, a war raging between his sense of justice and his fear of what happens to people who interfere. He finally shouted, "You can't do that, man! I got that on video!" Harrison spun around. "Put your phone away and step back unless you want to be next," he growled. But the moment had already changed. More phones lifted, the eyes of the city's conscience focused on that small wet patch of asphalt. The humiliation burning in the vendor's cheek spread to the witnesses' chests. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. The rain came down harder, drumming on metal, on pavement, on the scattered vegetables at their feet. Slowly, Mr. Lee straightened. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't push back. He simply looked at the officer in the eye, the humiliation draining from his expression, replaced by a calm that made the crowd hold their breath. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Oh yeah? And what are you gonna do about it?" The vendor reached into his shirt pocket, fingers steady now. For a second, the officer tensed, ready to shout, "Hands where I can see them!" But the man's movement was too deliberate, too controlled. He pulled out a small, dark leather wallet, not the cheap, worn kind that matched his disguise, but something finer. He flipped it open, then slowly removed the worn cap from his head, revealing neatly trimmed hair that suddenly looked far too polished for a man who pushed a cart for a living. The bystanders leaned in. Harrison glanced at the ID out of habit, expecting some fake vendor permit or foreign identification he could mock. Instead, he saw something else, a familiar city seal embossed in gold, a photograph he recognized from news broadcasts and campaign posters. Mayor Dominic Reyes. For a moment, the rain was the only sound. Harrison's lips parted. His eyes darted from the ID to the vendor's face, now unmistakably that of the man whose name was on every city building plaque. This is some kind of joke, he stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice.
Dominic Reyes, no longer Mr. Lee, held his gaze steadily. His cheek was still red from the slap. A bead of rain slipped down from his temple, following the line of the swelling skin. "No joke," the mayor said softly. "I came here today to see how my citizens are treated. It seems I chose the right corner." The watchers erupted in a low, stunned murmur. "Oh my God, it's really him," someone whispered. "Dude, you slapped the mayor," another breathed. The woman with the phone stepped closer, recording everything. Her voice shook with outrage. "We saw the whole thing, sir. He pushed your cart, he slapped you, he kept saying, 'you people.'" Harrison swallowed hard. His face, once flushed with anger, was now drained of blood. He started to talk, words tripping over themselves. "Mr. Mayor, I didn't realize. If I'd known it was you—" "That's exactly the problem," the mayor cut in, his voice still calm, but carrying more weight than any shout. "Would you have treated me differently if I'd been wearing a suit? If I'd stepped out of a black SUV instead of standing behind a cart?" Harrison opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no honest answer that didn't condemn him. More patrol cars began to arrive, drawn by the call for backup and the flashing lights. In one of them sat the mayor's security chief, his eyes wide as he saw his boss standing in plain clothes, surrounded by spilled vegetables and tense officers. "Sir," the chief breathed as he hurried over, "what is going on?" The mayor didn't look away from Harrison. "What's going on is exactly what I needed to see with my own eyes." He turned slightly, addressing both the officer and the crowd. This man believed he was confronting a powerless vendor, so he used his authority to intimidate, to humiliate, to hurt. He thought no one would stop him. He thought no one important was watching. He glanced at the phones raised around them. But the truth is, people are always watching, and every person you meet on these streets is important. Harrison tried again, desperate. "Sir, I've served this city for 15 years. I've put my life on the line. I was just trying to enforce..." "Enforce what? Order or your temper?" Silence answered him. He let the silence stretch, making sure every camera caught it, making sure the weight of the moment settled on every uniform in sight. "Officer Harrison, you are relieved of duty pending an internal investigation, right here, right now." The security chief nodded grimly and stepped up beside Harrison. "Badge and gun," he said quietly. The officer stared at him, then at the mayor, disbelief etched into every line of his face. But the crowd's eyes were on him, the cameras unblinking, the rain washing away whatever illusion of invincibility he had carried. Hands trembling, he unpinned his badge. The small metal shield that had once made him feel untouchable suddenly weighed a ton. He unbuckled his holster and handed over his weapon. For the first time that day, he looked small. As he was led back toward the patrol car, he heard the whispers. He thought he could get away with it. He did that because he thought the guy was nobody. Imagine what happens when there's no camera. The mayor watched him go, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to his cart, to the ruined produce strewn across the shining street. A woman bent down and began picking up the vegetables, placing what could be saved back onto the cart. The man in the gray shirt joined her. Soon others followed, their small gestures of kindness forming a quiet rebellion against the cruelty they had just witnessed. "Mr. Mayor," the woman with the reddish hair said, Are you okay?" He touched his cheek, feeling the throbbing sting beneath his fingers. "I will be. I felt worse pain reading letters from people who never got the chance to speak up." He looked at the camera still recording him and raised his voice just enough to carry. Today wasn't about catching one bad officer. It was about exposing a mindset, a belief that some people are too small to matter, that some jobs are too low to deserve respect, that some faces can be slapped without consequence. He paused, letting the rain fill the gap. But there are no nobodies in this city, not on my watch. Later that week, the footage from that rainy afternoon would spread far beyond the corner of 7th and Marlowe. It would play on news channels, be shared on social media, be argued about over dinner tables. Some would say the officer was stressed, that he just had a bad day. Others would point out that for people like Mr. Lee, every day could turn bad in an instant. Most importantly, policies would change. A new oversight committee would be formed, with seats reserved not just for officials, but for street vendors, bus drivers, janitors. People who knew what it felt like to live at eye level with authority, not above it. And sometimes, on rainy mornings, the mayor would still visit that same corner, not in disguise, but with security keeping a respectful distance. He'd buy fruit from the very vendors whose lives his experiment had aimed to understand. They would smile at him, half shy, half proud, knowing that their corner of the city had become a symbol of something larger. On one such morning, as he handed a few dollars to a vendor, the man asked softly, "Mr. Mayor, why would you risk yourself like that? You could have just signed a law from your office." Dominic Reyes looked down the wet street, where the reflections of traffic lights danced in puddles. He thought of the slap, of the shock, of the taste of rain and humiliation on his tongue. Because laws written on paper are easy to ignore. But stories like that day, people remember those. They make us ask harder questions. He turned back to the vendor. Like this one. When we see power used to harm instead of protect, will we stay silent or will we speak up, even if the person being hurt looks like a nobody? The vendor nodded slowly, understanding. Because now the city knew. Sometimes the person behind the simple cart in the simple clothes isn't just a vendor. Sometimes he's the one who runs the entire city. And other times, he's simply a human being who deserves respect. Something that should matter, whether there's a hidden title, a hidden camera, or no disguise at all.